Merchants, and the series that I have, the series of presentations, is called Maps and Keys of the Currency, just colorizing that aspect of money, which is again is just sometimes an intimidating or detracting endeavor. Sometimes we just view that external world of money, we see greed, or we see something that's very dry and that there's no spirit within it. And so that's another thing that I would like to help us tune into, is the spirit of finance and the currency, this current or this energy that is moving around all throughout the world, and it acts very much like the current in the ocean, the current in the sea. Play on words there. So first off, I wanted to get a consensus. How many people out there are business owners, currently own a business? A couple? Okay. How many people are looking to start a business sometime in the future? You have an idea and you want to make it manifest? Awesome. How many businesses do you guys think are here at LIB right now? A lot. A ton of businesses. LIB itself is a business. And then you have all of these different stands, which are businesses. You have all the different artists, which are businesses. And so, I mean, who knows how many, probably hundreds and hundreds of businesses here at LIB, all working in harmony together in this world of exchange, where we exchange value with one another, and that world is called commerce. So I want to talk a little bit about trade fairs. Anybody ever heard of a trade fair? You can kind of look at it back in the olden days, or even now there's trade fairs that exist, but it's basically an event that takes place for the purpose of helping facilitate commerce. So of course, there's, when we think of fair, we may think of like Ferris wheels and stuff like that, but basically a lot of small towns would come together in the past, and rather than merchants coming and passing through each town individually, they would all the towns would agree to assemble in one location so that the merchants could come together and all the people could come together and they could perform trade. And that's where trade fairs arise, and of course then we have commerce that arises as well. And sometimes when we are exchanging value, there's different interpretations for how the value is exchanged, and disputes often arise. And believe it or not, there were courts that would actually travel around as well. So we have this concept of traveling courts and the emergence of the merchant court and the law merchant. Now, if we break apart that term merchant, which is, again, maybe not necessarily the most colorful word at first glance, but if we break it apart, we've got that mer prefix. Anybody know what mer means? Maybe a European language. M-E-R means sea. So we have the mermaid. And so we have the merchant as well. So we have the sea, and then chant is kind of like a song. So it's something about the song of the sea and participating in the song of the sea, which may just be exchange. So it's very fundamental here. Man didn't make exchange. Exchange is something that exists in nature. And so we're looking to identify with that aspect of nature and see how it appears all throughout the world of man. Because sometimes we like to, and we tend to separate the world of man from the world of nature, and we look at man as like something being separate from nature, the abomination of nature. Even looking at some taboo things like the oil industry, there's that perspective that we're not being conscious, and we're making mistakes by just pulling this oil out of the earth and then expelling it into the atmosphere, and then there's certain effects that it has with it. But maybe Earth is conscious as a whole, and Earth actually is intelligent, and we're all operating whether we're conscious or not. It's not dependent upon our consciousness, whether we're conscious of the divinity or not, or the intelligence of Earth or not. Maybe Earth wants to get this stuff out of its body and expel it in the air, but then it's going to trigger us to shift, and I think that trigger is happening right now. But it's okay to accept, I feel, that things that we've done in the past is not necessarily being mistakes rather than being divine, and maybe we just need to learn a little bit more on why it's divine and why it's happening, and it's not necessarily just because we're asleep and greedy, or you basically resulting in something with a negative connotation. So back in the day, we had this law merchant, the merchant law, which governs the exchange at these trade fairs. And today in the United States, we have something different called the Uniform Commercial Code, which is basically a multi-dimensional code of exchange that outlines just giving and receiving on different dimensions. And so it's definitely something worth looking into, and not necessarily something you need to read the whole thing, but maybe just to familiarize yourself with it by checking it out, learning how to navigate through it. Sometimes when we're sailing across the ocean, we don't necessarily need to know every single aspect of the ocean or the water. We're just trying to get from A to B. And with law, it's very much the same way. We're just looking to navigate through these codes in order to find out the guidance that we need, and then we can move forward. So the craft of manifesting ideas, that's really what business is all about. We have ideas, and sometimes the idea is too big for an individual. And yeah, we could have individual businesses, but chances are you're going to end up collaborating with different people. And with that collaboration, there's going to need to be some type of structure and a lot of other different elements. And so ideas comprise the ocean of manifestation, kind of like in the ethereal realm. We have all of these ideas out here, and it's just a huge giant ocean, and we're trying to pull these ideas together, collect them together, and bring them out into the earth. And again, we collaborate with one another in order to do that, and we use business to help us facilitate that movement. So we're going to explore the idea that an idea is an element. And in alchemy, here's just a little definition of alchemy: a philosophical and proto-scientific tradition aimed to purify, mature, and perfect certain objects. So one way I look at alchemy is just the manner in which an element or something moves from one element into another. And we can call that transmutation, we can call that alchemy. But if we were to guess what an idea is, what element is an idea? Out of the four elements, earth, wind, water, and fire, what is an idea? Fire? Air? Anybody else? Yeah, I could see it as air. I could see it as fire too, because it is electric. It has energy, and it has. Everything is physical. It manifests itself. Well, that's the idea, right? We want to take the idea and bring it into Earth, and so there's an alchemical process there, and so it kind of starts up in the air sign, and it's like we can't even see it. I mean, I guess our inner senses can see it, but we can't see it, or we can't have. Not everybody else sees it, so we've got to kind of bring it forth into this world so everybody else can experience that idea. And in a way, the idea already exists. It's not something new. It's something that you're tapping into or channeling into, and you're collecting ideas over time to bring out one big idea. It's a birthing process. So here's an old slide from one of my past talks, and it talks about the four classical elements. And on that left-hand side, you can see just the conversion. I've identified most of the terms for converting one element into another. We have water to air. That's evaporation. We have water to earth. That's precipitation. So there's a list right there. You can kind of check it out. And then I have the four elements: air, water, earth, and fire. Now, how does something go from the air sign and move into the water sign? It comes, and you have an idea here, an idea here, an idea here, and you're meditating on it, and it's kind of creating some type of momentum over time. And I would say that we are concentrating. We actually use that word when we think, right? We say, hey, concentrate. Well, what is concentrate? It's like, what do we say when something's concentrated? It's just really thick with some type of substance. So we're concentrating, and in nature we say the air or the water molecules in the air, when they come together, we don't say concentrating, we say they're condensing. But still, it's concentrating at the same time. And so when there's enough concentration, then what happens? We have raindrops that come down from the sky. So in a way, our idea is kind of like, once we concentrate, it starts coming out in different ways. Maybe we're talking to people. Maybe we're writing it down. There could be many different ways in which we begin to precipitate the idea into the earth. Now, when the raindrop is coming down, I guess you could just look at it where it's coming from the clouds and then it just drops and it hits the ground and that's it. But on its way down, this little collection of water is maybe collecting a lot of different elements and materials on its way down. So even as the water sign, it's building up into something else when it goes towards the earth. Then when it hits the earth, there's kind of two different pieces there. There's the pure water part, and then there's like the minerals and the solids that are inside. And so those things can kind of work together into bring nourishment to some new life. And that's what we're talking about. Okay, how do we take an idea, turn into water? What happened when the raindrops fall? What happens when the raindrops fall and hit the ground? So that's where we're at right now. So then there's life that comes from that. So again, same thing with the idea. The idea starts as air, we concentrate, we get it out in a couple different ways, and over time, the more we spend time with it and we care about it, we're nurturing, and new life can come out. But even with that new life, there's the living thing, but then there are the fruits of the living thing, and we might be able to equate that to products and services. The products and services the products and services of a business are the fruit of that business. Which brings us to permaculture, which is a system of agriculture and social design principles centered around simulating or directly utilizing the patterns and features observed in natural ecosystems. That's kind of what's already happening with the business process, the process of manifesting ideas. We are imitating nature. It's not, the business world isn't a separate thing from nature, it's just an extension of it. And so there we have it. The fruit of a tree is the idea made manifest. Manifest not only in the form of earth, but in the form of life. And so maybe that's what our product and service is. It's living, it's present, it's in the moment. It contributes to our story. It gives value to other people. And then we're looking to receive value in exchange, or we do receive value in exchange for giving that value. Those who engage in the craft of bringing ideas to life are those who influence the transmutation of one element to another. So by engaging in the art of business, or just an art of manifesting ideas in general, we are alchemists in a way, because we're moving something. I guess it's immaterial. It starts immaterial, but we're moving it from our inner world to the external world. And those who perform such magic are deemed alchemists. So the main question here, what is business? How do we look to redefine business? I mean, when I was growing up, business was probably one of the most boring terms on the planet next to retirement and insurance. Business was a very boring term for me, but it's become more exciting as time progresses. And so I have the symbol of commerce there. We see it quite often. Sometimes we see it in the health world. But basically it's two serpents climbing up a staff, and then there's wings at the top, kind of a symbol of the Kundalini. But Hermes Mercurius held this staff, and Hermes was a messenger god. And in a way, that's kind of what commerce is as well. It's the delivery of messages or information or things from one person to another. But the end result, the idea that I want everybody to have in mind here, the idea that I want everybody to entertain, is that business is the vehicle by which we manifest big ideas. Could this event have happened without business existing? Well, even if there wasn't maybe a government system out there, a lot of the elements of business would have to exist in order for us to be here. There would have to be a product or service. We could call this a service. And we have many artists who are offering products and services. We have marketing, we have promotions. We heard about it through some means. And so all of these elements naturally exist. These are natural phenomena. They're not something that was invented by man. They're just something that was taken into a different form by man and expressed in a different way by man. And that leads us to the rise of entrepreneurship, which is a combination of developments. Okay, so this is something interesting from Fortune. From 2014 about the rise of entrepreneurship. Does anybody else feel that a lot of people are just not wanting to have the 9-to-5 job, and they're looking to kind of go into business for themselves and to kind of govern and regulate themselves? It's a huge dedication to do that, but it's also, there's a lot of freedom. I mean, I know that 9-to-5, I've done it before in the past, and I definitely was compelled to start governing myself and moving my own creations through the business process. So here's what Fortune has to say. A combination of developments in technology, financing, and corporate culture is behind the rising power and leverage of small companies. As a result, an increasingly diverse cross-section of individuals is leaving large organizations and pursuing the creation of their own businesses. What else you got, Fortune? Something else? Large companies with their complex integrated systems are struggling to keep up with the pace of technology developments and finding it hard to respond quickly to meet business demands. And that's something I find big in conversations right now. Who else feels the inherent disadvantage of really large corporations? There's an inherent disadvantage there. There's like a disconnect between that giant organism and the individuals a lot of the time. And sometimes we even just throw all businesses into one huge lump and say, well, business is to blame for a lot of our problems, corporate America or the corporatocracy, which is interesting. There's a biological process going on here with the corp. Corp just means, anybody know what corp means? C-O-R-P? I heard it. Body. It's a body. So it's kind of funny that like we're going through this business manifestation process, or we're using business as the vehicle, and we end up saying that these collective the collective consciousness of these individual states is sometimes called corporations. Not all the time. Every business isn't a corporation. It's a special type of business that makes it into a corporation, a separate and distinct legal entity. Sometimes legal entities get lumped all together as a corporation. That's just not necessarily true. An LLC isn't necessarily a corporation. You can elect to treat it as one, but I think that's really important to understand, that there's legal entities out there that are not necessarily corporations. It's a very distinct, separate thing. Okay, so again, these big entities are because they're so big, they're slow. They're slow in adapting to the times. Look how long some big entities right now are going organic finally. Anybody know one of the big food producing entities that is like slowly going organic? I know there's a couple out there. You can shout it out. I don't know if it was Kraft or something, but there's some big names out there that are finally going organic. They're finally catching on. But why is it taking them so long to catch on to that concept? Because they're big, and because they're big, they're slow. So there's an inherent advantage now with the smaller entities existing that they can adapt quickly because they're smaller. And that's what Fortune is saying here. In contrast, empowered entrepreneurs can adapt and execute fast, expanding nimbly at co-working spaces and benefiting from the increasing pool of flexible talent. All right, let's look at some numbers here. In 2013, venture capitalists invested $29.4 billion in 3,995 deals, which is up 7% in dollars and 4% in deals from a year earlier. So that's really a pretty nice proportion of growth over time there in 1 year. Total funds invested increasing at all stages of development, according to Money True report by PwC and the National Venture Capital Association. Okay. So again, the whole focus here is we're looking at business through kaleidoscope eyes, because even if maybe you're inspired to create a product or service, that's really great. And again, that product or service, that's one thing that it's just kind of genuine. Like, oh, so it's going to be so much fun to create the branding, and what colors is it going to be? How am I going to create my website? But maybe you're not so enthusiastic about the other elements of business, like marketing or writing a business plan or dealing with the legal or financial aspects of it. So we got to put on kaleidoscope eyes, get a different perspective, and start looking at metaphors to describe these different elements of business, because we just went through this process of comparing it to nature and the alchemical process of moving one element to another, or transmuting from one element to another. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the relationship between the entrepreneur's viewpoint, or the lens, and the qualities of the business itself? So this puts a lot of power to the individual and what they're looking at. It's not necessarily that a business is boring, or a business is one thing or the other, or it corrupts you, or it takes you away from your family. Sometimes we see that a lot growing up in TV shows. The dad is always really busy with his business, and he can't go play baseball with the son. I remember seeing that kind of narrative all the time. And so it's really up to us to tune our viewpoint to make the business process as colorful, imaginative, and fun as humanly possible. possible. And we have to ask ourselves, are we reacting or are we creating to this external world? And so that's kind of interesting. Do we look at something, we do have our initial like, wow, that's interesting, that's like that, I don't like that. But reaction really makes it to where we're more dependent upon the environment, and then we're saying that it's an unmoving thing, and then we just have our feelings towards it, and that's it. And there's not a lot of room for life or growth. Creation is very different because it puts the power to the individual and it allows us to influence what something looks like, what something is. Some talks I've had in the past has gone deep into the Federal Reserve, which is one of those government agencies that there's got a lot of negative publicity. There's documentaries out there that have the dark music, and they've got black and white pictures of these people who have, feel like their goal is to enslave you, and that doesn't really give you a good taste about what that entity is or what it does. But we have to realize that that's just a third-party perspective of that entity, and that's like me making judgments off of one of you just by listening to what someone else has to say. And if they say something negative, then I come to the conclusion that then that's just who you are based on their perspective. So we really got to start examining these governing entities for ourselves. And when I went in, I was a very anti-Fed type of guy. And I just decided one day to say, you know what, this thing is inside of me as well as outside of me. It's a fractal universe. Outside of me is a projection of those things that are inside of me. So somewhere inside of me, the Federal Reserve exists and it's divine. So I'm just going to go ahead and look into this for myself. And when I did go and look into it for myself, I found something very different than what was being portrayed to me by a lot of the documentaries out there on YouTube with the dark music and that are perpetuating ideas that, the people who have wealth or financial competence are really just wanting to enslave everybody perpetually. So what's funny about the word reaction and creation is they actually have the same letters in them. If you look, they're the same exact letters, but all you're moving is the C in the react, that ACT, you're just moving that C to the front and you're making create. So it's the same exact material, but it's just a shifting of the letters. And so maybe that's how little of a move we need to take to start shifting from reaction to creation ourselves. So what are the basic elements of business? Now, elements actually is a very popular word in the world of law. For instance, if you want to know what a contract is, like what is a contract? What are the necessary elements that make up a contract? It's very standard, very easy to look up. You can find it. There's an offer, there's acceptance, there's consideration, there's manifestation of assent, or something also known as meeting of the minds. But for some reason, when I looked up, hey, what are the basic elements of business? Like where's that list of things that if I want to start a business, what are these things that I need to become familiar with? I don't necessarily need to be the best in everything, because there's probably a lot of friends out there that specialize in different things that I could do trades with, but I at least need to know, I need to familiarize myself with these basic elements. I couldn't find any website that showed the basic elements of business, so I decided to create something for myself. So in the middle, I've got this kind of like celestial character that's unisex. It's not necessarily a man or a woman, but it's a picture I got off the internet. It's just a guy with like a galaxy inside his head, and it's really sleek. And I really want to help reinvent this concept of being a business person, because again, we've got these documentaries out there that are preaching rising consciousness, yet they depict wearing a suit in such a dark light. I think it was Zeitgeist that had like the people walking mindlessly with the suitcase in hand and with the tie on, and it was black and white, and they're just all like mindless in the Matrix people. But is that actually what exists, or is that a perspective of what exists? I mean, to me, that perspective was sold to me as a really great story for a while, but the fact of the matter is that story doesn't really inspire me, and it doesn't really connect me with this external, governmental, natural world that does exist. So I shifted that perspective. I became more curious, and I see lots more color in that business world now. So I want to start, we're going to go clockwise here. These are the basic elements of business the way I see it. And I'm definitely open to further development. But the first thing I want to start with, which is not probably something that is usually started with in traditional business, and that is ethics. I think we're all aware there's a lot of businesses out there that are really focused on one thing. What is that one thing?
Profit.
Yeah, it's profit. It's profit. And so there's a fundamental flaw in just only wanting to start a business to create profit. And because there's many other things to consider. And so what's funny, the fundamental flaw that exists is one of the most basic forms of corporation is called a C Corp. And the C Corp doesn't have any, when you do your mission statement, your main goal is to provide some product and service for the purpose of making a profit. But yet there's a new entity that's come out recently. It's called the B Corp. And the B Corp isn't only focused on making a profit, it's also focused on many other factors. So here's what I say. B Corp is to business this is actually not me, this is bcorporation.net. B Corp is to business what fair trade certification is to coffee, or USDA organic certification is to food. That's a really interesting metaphor right there. So now there's a new business structure. So again, we might blame all these people out here who are using C Corps and saying, hey, you're not really taking the environment into consideration. But over here, they're saying, you know what? If we make less profit by making these other considerations, even though they're within the confines of the law, then that's actually against our purpose, and we can get sued by our investors. So it's not necessarily the business owners themselves. It's the fundamental structure of that type of legal entity. But now we've got another option out there that is gaining popularity, which is the B Corp. B Corps are for-profit companies certified by nonprofit B Lab, check out B Lab on your own, to meet rigorous standards of social, environmental performance, accountability, and transparency. So what I'm seeing out there with this shift in viewing is that B Corps are going to become more popular in the future. Forget about what the law says, forget the law trying to just ban the corporation by itself. I think it's becoming more fashionable to be environmentally conscious. And that's kind of a funny thing to say. I'm trying to go from the most superficial perspective possible, from a business perspective, from a not just profit-making perspective, but to attract people. We've all seen that it's kind of really catching on to go green. Even companies are just trying to change their colors to make it look like that they care about the environment by using brown and green, which obviously, because now we're getting more and more proficient at checking labels and whatnot, that trick doesn't really work very well. So what I see here as legal entity, if we look at all these different legal entities out here as different types of organisms, I see kind of a fall in the popularity of the for-profit only purpose C Corp and a rise in the maybe we should consider some other factors B Corp, and maybe we could find investors out there that also are willing to consider these other factors and actually won't even do business with us unless we say we're considering those factors, regardless of whether a C Corp is making more profit or not. It may just simply be more unattractive. I'm sorry, more attractive to go with the B Corp. So when starting a business, there's some ethical considerations, which again, the B Corp thing does address a little bit, but we're going to go into it a little bit more. One thing is you have to realize that there's a huge time commitment to starting a business, and there's going to be an effect that it has on you with not just time, but also, I guess your focus is just going somewhere else. It's going towards a good or service that's going to bring value to other people. And you really want to be effective at doing that. But you want to consider what effect this is going to have on your body and what effect this is going to have on your family as well. Again, I think back to many different cartoons or shows growing up and seeing this idea, or even with friends in the real world, and seeing that their parents were always busy working, or the dad was always busy with his business and they weren't giving enough time to the family. So we want to make sure we maintain balance. I think that's what this is all about. The rise of the B Corp is all about balance, and also making these considerations is about maintaining balance, because we don't want to create this good or service while sacrificing and benefiting all these people who are interested and could benefit from it, while sacrificing our individual well-being or our family well-being. We also definitely want to consider the economic effect and the environmental effect, and that goes along with the B Corp, and of course you can do other types of entities as well, but the B Corp is interesting because it's a for-profit entity that also, in its purpose, states that it also considers these other factors, which are very important. The second part is something I think a lot of people overlook. I think the ethics thing probably most everyone here has down. But the planning aspect, if all this stuff stays in your head and it stays as the air sign, then we're going to experience a lot of struggles with making this thing manifest. If we just go straight from air to the earth sign, I feel like it may be a more smoother ride if we add some water to that, and condense, concentrate, precipitate, make some raindrops. Gravity comes into effect there as well, because it's so concentrated, gravity has an effect and brings it down to the earth. So the business plan is the story of your idea. Now, how many people out there, again, like have a business or right now? All right. How many people have written a plan for their business or are working on a written plan? Okay. Cool. A little bit less. So probably one of the most like, hey, what the heck do I need to do this for? I know what I need to do. A business plan is not only good for showing other people the story of your company, it's also good for you. It acts as that transmutation from the air sign to the water sign, because it allows us to bring it into earth to some degree. Now, even though it's just words on a piece of paper, it's something that we now can look at, go to sleep, wake up in the morning and say, wow, okay, this is totally not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something completely different. But at least it starts, you can edit it, and now you have something physical that you can start working with. And so that's one thing I'd like everybody to start considering, is the business plan is the story of your business, and it helps to further captivate you into the idea of your business, and it helps to further captivate others when they read your business plan. And when you have them captivated, then again, it becomes something fun, for one, but also it really helps the thing make manifest. And so, how do we write a business plan? Isn't that funny? You could just Google how to write a business plan, and there's a government entity out there that has a whole instruction series of web pages on how to write a business plan, and that is sba.gov, small business, I think it's administration.gov. So check that out. They've got a plan for you. It's a guideline. It's not something you need to adhere to 100%, but it's a nice place to start if you're not sure where to go with it. And as my writing teacher always said, don't get it right, get it written. Just get something down on the paper. And when you have something down, you can kind of, again, go back to it and revisit it later and say, wow, this is totally not what I wanted. Oh, this right here, this piece is what I wanted, but not this right here. And you could change it. And so over time, the idea moves out of just in the head mode and now moves into the physical world to a certain degree. Again, it's not your product or service, but it is a reflection of the product or service in earth form. And the business plan is a living document. It's always changing, and I do most of my business plans in Photoshop and Illustrator. It's an art project. It's really fun. You get to pick your color scheme and how your front page is going to look, and whenever you give it to someone, you've got to look at it like this is a story. I don't want to, it's just like any other type of story when you're writing, you don't want to distract the reader from the captivation process. It's just like if you're watching a movie, you want to be captivated, you want to be inspired, but you know when that little thing happens in the movie that distracts you and says, oh man, they did that. Why did the writer choose to do that? When you start seeing the writer behind the movie, and you're not really involved in the fantasy with the characters, and we're looking to have that experience and become captivated so we can become inspired, and we want to participate in the manifestation of that thing. And so we also have to look at what our audience is. Anybody ever heard the term investment deck? There's that term out there, the investment deck. Oh, I got to prepare my investment deck. Why do they call it a deck? The way I look at it is they call it an investment deck because if you're going from one investor to another, this investor may be different, have different interests, and you may need to pitch it at a different angle than this other investor. So you may take your plan and assemble a couple of pieces to present it to this one, and then you have to make a new deck, a different type of deck, maybe with more detail or less detail or more color to this investor over here. So we definitely have to consider the audience when we are presenting or preparing something to present. Team is the next one, and sometimes it is just you starting alone, sometimes it's you just starting with a few people, but be sure that when you have a team that you really communicate and make sure that you have shared values, because a lot of time could be, I don't want to say wasted, but a lot of time could be spent with trying to collaborate with those who you really don't have shared values with. And then try to figure out what type of consideration that you're going to be giving or exchanging for people giving values. Maybe they have a share in that company or endeavor. Maybe you're doing some other type of service for them that your company kind of represents, or something else on the side. Maybe it's a back massage in exchange for someone helping you with your website. It could be many different things. Consideration is a great word. If you break it apart, you've got con, which that prefix con means with or together. Then you got side, so with the side, and then you have ration, with the ration of the side, making sure both sides have, they're equal on both sides. Otherwise, if people don't think something's equal, that's where disputes arise. And then we have contracting. That's another big intimidating factor, I feel like, that a lot of people have. What is a contract? Contract is just making something smaller, making something defined. We have contracting and expanding, which is really just what everything is: frequency and breadth and what do we call this? Going up and down. It's like waves. There's a lot of different terms out there. But become familiar with contracting. Don't just go on the full faith and exchange with people, even though we may feel that, oh yeah, this is just on a by the word thing. The reason why contracting is really important, because one, it allows you the opportunity to get your idea written on what you're going to give and what you're going to receive, and then allows the other person to get what they're going to give and what they're going to receive written. So it really provides for clarification. I mean, forget, maybe you're both really good people and you have good credibility, you're people of your word, but maybe you interpret the exchange differently, and what could really help to make sure that you're interpreting it in the same manner, or at least the most similar manner possible, is to get that thing written and to go ahead and put your seal on it, which is to sign it. So business structure. I've got pieces on a chessboard here. And the reason why is because people are always asking, what should my business structure be? Should I start an LLC? Should I start a C Corp? Should I start a B Corp? Should I start a nonprofit? Should I have a sole proprietor? And the way I look at it is, look, these are all pieces on a chessboard. There's many different types of legal entities out there, and you should really become familiar with each one and weigh the pros and cons. But even a pawn could be the piece on the board that gets you your checkmate. So lots of pieces on the chessboard there. Be sure to become familiar. The queen isn't always the most powerful, but sometimes it is. Products and services. What value are you offering, and to whom are you offering it to? This is where the idea of business often arises. It's just, I have inspiration, I have abilities, I have skills, I have value that I could give out to the world. I want to give it in as much as possible to, and in exchange for that value, I'm looking to, or I'm open to receiving that equal value. And again, with Newton's third law, for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. If you give a certain level of value, you're going to receive that same level of value in return. So really consider what that value is that you're going to be offering to the world. What are you communicating through your product and services? And how are you going to brand it? What's the impression that you're going to leave when somebody takes that product or service, when they have that experience? It's going to serve them not just in the moment, but maybe it's going to inspire them further. And so we want to maximize that impression that we leave, a positive impression. Products and services are the fruit produced from the tree of business. We talked about that. I've got colors on the law here because law is probably one of the top 5 most boring terms that has existed when I was growing up. And then all of a sudden it hit me that not only am I the law, but all of the law that exists in these written books are extensions of natural laws. They can't defy the laws of nature. They can't defy gravity, or they can't defy Newton's third law. For every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. They have to abide by it. So all you're going to see in these written laws is extensions of natural law. And sometimes if the words appear dry to you and you're looking into it, really try to use metaphors or parables to relate to it in a different way. And that's where the color starts coming in. The color starts coming in where, sometimes, when I see laws like the piping. Like, law is just a bunch of pipes, and it provides the structure for how the value can move through. And it's the masculine in a way. And the feminine aspect could be the water. And the water can't get from A to B without the male structure. So you have these things working in harmony. We like to play them against one another a lot of time, but it's all about the harmony or the balance that exists between the water and the piping, or law and finance, or maybe it's not finance or the currency that's flowing through the piping, but it's your product or service. So the law provides a guideline that, and again, we don't need to read every law. That's nearly impossible. We just need to learn how to be open to navigating through the law to understand which pieces can really serve us. And law isn't just necessarily like a burden that exists for us. And I'll give you an example. If you're interested in starting a nonprofit organization, probably like a 501c3, one of the best things you can do to learn what you need for that organization to work properly, forget the law for a second, what you actually, all of the things you need to make it work properly, it actually already exists if you just look at the exemption application. If you look at Form 1023, the IRS exemption application for your nonprofit, it's going to tell you everything that you need to know to make your company work well, your nonprofit work well. So rather than saying, oh man, we got to fill this whole thing out, it actually is a development tool that you get for free. And it's a great service. So tuning ourselves to see things like that, to see opportunity rather than hindrance or burden. And with the considerations that we have with law is licensing and permits, contracting, and also stock offerings. Stock is actually the way that you can create your own money. And it's backed by the value of your good and service. And the way that people around you see that, you could bring this currency into the world. It could be invisible and digital and just be on a screen, or you could make certificates. I mean, think about how cool that is. You make your company, now you get to make these really cool stock certificates that actually have value, perceived value, or value that other people see, and it can act as a currency, it can act as an investment, it could fund people's education or retirement. We could invest in your stock. We could have stock exchanges here. Imagine if all of these companies here had cool little certificates or coins that we could trade with one another, and when we invest in them, we got the good and service, but what if we want to give a little bit extra? Well, now we've got some stock, and as the company grows, now we're basically investing in that company to make it grow. We're giving it water in a way, that currency, and it's going to help us grow in return by saying, hey, as we grow, you grow. So it's this sacred exchange that's happening here that I think often goes amiss. We view that stock exchange world being separate from this world, this community working to be in harmony with nature. I think there is no separation besides the separation that you're seeing. Finance. How are you funding your company? Well, there's a couple of different ways. You can work and save money, and you can fund it yourself. You can ask your family and friends. Make sure you have a business plan first, though. You have a business network. I mean, there's LinkedIn, there's all these social media networks, there's events like this, there's tons of business networking going on here. Somebody's project is getting funded here at LIB, probably more than one. Then you have crowdfunding. We've all heard of that, which is basically just many different people funding a different project. There's pros and cons to crowdfunding versus using stocks. Stocks, again, are an ownership interest in the company, and bonds are issuing debt. And what are all these things? It's like all these words may be somewhat unfamiliar. We've heard them before, but all of these things at the end of the day are just symbols on pieces of paper. There's really nothing more to it than symbols on paper, and we just want to learn how these symbols relate to other symbols, because symbols on piece of paper can move for one value, and you change the symbols and you move them around a different way, and they can move for a higher value, and that's it at the end of the day. It's just a card game in a game of symbols. It's much more fun than any card game like Magic, if you've heard of that, or poker. This is a card game where you can make your own cards, and there's tons of dealers out there. And so it really colorizes this world and shows how much potential in life that there is to it. Develop a financial plan. There are financial planners out there. I'm actually going to school to be a certified financial planner, which focuses on 5 different things, I believe. We have education planning, retirement planning, investment planning, tax planning, and there's one more. What is it? Estate planning, leaving that legacy. So it's really interesting, and you would think this stuff maybe again, it's like we're colorizing it. So something interesting, how many people have gone and paid for something? Like I just heard people talking about a permaculture class they paid $1,000 for. How many people have paid for some class that's outside of a university to further their education recently or throughout their life, anytime? Have spent thousands of dollars? Anybody? Thousands of dollars? There's actually something out there called the Lifetime Learning Credit, and what the government says is that if you're spending $10,000, let's say, or $5,000, up to around $10,000 on furthering your education for your career, it does not have to be through a four-year accredited school, then they will give you 20% tax credit, which means if you're spending $10,000, you get $2,000 in tax credits from the government. Now, if you don't know that exists, then you're paying 100% when you really could only be paying 80% because the government is offering that because they really want you to be more educated. And I say they, really it's we, really it's me, you and me, because this is projections. And so, wow, that's awesome that we get 20% off of up to $10,000 per year for lifetime. And so that means we're basically getting a 20% discount on that first $10,000 for furthering our education. And why? Because the more we're educated, the better our businesses are for this country. It helps the country and the economy out. That's why it's there. So that's what was that? It already exists. It's a law that already exists. It's in the boring IRS tax plan. Who knows why IRS and IRS sound similar? But there it is there, and all it took was a little bit of awareness, and we can start using that. But please see a certified financial advisor before you utilize something like that. All right, so I just kind of lumped these last few together in these elements of business: web development, marketing, promotions, advertising. These days, there's so many different platforms to develop your own website. Get a basic understanding of Photoshop and Illustrator. I guarantee everybody in this room has a friend who does Photoshop or Illustrator. It's such a fun process making your website, and guess what? You're going to build your website, you're going to build that first page, you're going to go to sleep at night, you're going to wake up the next morning and say, this is totally not what I want. I can't believe I published this. And you're going to work on it, and over time, you're going to perfect it. And if you're in college right now, and you're interested in starting a business like after you graduate, start your business now, because it takes time to refine it and perfect it over time. And it'd be much better to, 4 years down the road, have 4 years of refinement of your website or of your company by the time you finish school. Marketing, promotion, advertising, I'm kind of lumping all of those together for the time being, but that's basically the way we're communicating how we go about exchanging the value and how we attract people to the goods or services that we're offering. And so the last thing that we're going to focus on here, see where we at on time. We got about 5 minutes. So I wanted to do an exercise. These are the elements that we've all gone through on the left-hand side: ethics, planning, team, business structure, products and services, all the way down. And what I want to ask you to think about is, what part of the body, the human body, or any body, I guess it could be a body of a frog, do you think each one of these represent? If it's truly, we can create a corp or a body to represent a collective idea, collective consciousness, an organism, really. A business is a type of life. What part of our body is in charge of ethics? Heart? Yeah, that's the first thing I thought. If I heard something else, I heard brain. That's another aspect as well. That's interesting. And there's no right answer. This is just something to consider when you're looking at this. And it's another way to relate to something. What part of this is going on inside of me? Because there's plenty of exchange and commerce going on inside here. And then when we enter into relationships in general, there's a bunch of exchange. So also planning. What part of our body is planning? Yeah, okay, I hear brain. Yeah, brain's probably the closest one. I don't know. Shout something out if you see something different. What about the team? Heart? Soul, okay. I guess the cells, that's what I'm going with right there. You've heard talks in the past. But we have all these individual cells in our body, which are like little individual people that have all pledged themselves to a greater body. Geez, that sounds like a legal entity. That sounds like a business. So in a way, a business is mirroring our body, because we are made up of a bunch of individual organisms that have pledged themselves together to form a greater union. Business structure. What part of our body contributes to structure? I would say the skeletal system. Without that skeletal system, it's going to be really hard to get around. So I really think I see the skeletal system as structure. Team, going back to that, in ways we work together, in ways we communicate with one another. Anybody ever heard of that endocannabinoid system? It's getting really big. The endocannabinoid system we have. And there's like cannabinoid deficiencies, but if we get those cannabinoids, those CBDs up, that we can better govern ourselves, better govern our body. In fact, when cancer exists, the reason why the CBDs and other cannabinoids are so important is because they act as a relay between the CB1 receptors in our nervous system and the CB2 receptors on these cells, because even when the cell mutates with cancer, the CB2 receptor stays there, but if the central government system can't communicate with the individual person, then that person is going to replicate and go out of control, that mutated person. So what the fueling our endocannabinoid system does is it allows us, our internal system, to better govern itself, and therefore we can prevent disease or resolve disease. So check into that. Products and services, we can look at that in a lot of different ways. Having a baby, I guess you could say, is a product and service. I know in the past we look at that and we would say, oh my God, it's like they're treating the children like, you're treating someone's relationship like a business. That's not right. But I think it's great, and I think there's a lot of heart in something like that. But interesting, products and services, also anything we create. You're drawing art. Of course, people's art is their products and services, so anything that we really create can be a product or service. Law is going to go back into structure. Finance, I'd say, is easy. That's the energy. That's the energy that's going through our body. Money is the energy. Web development, that's our face. That's like our public face. You got marketing, promotion, advertising. Those last three I'm just lumping together. Promotion is an interesting term. Market is just the way you present your product, and then that promotion is a way that you can kind of really attract people, that why it's a good deal, or maybe a good deal right now versus a week from now. And also advertising can participate that as well. But this is, we want to ask ourselves questions that are going to make looking at the business or product creation process much more colorful, because it's going to make things fun. It's going to inspire us. It's not going to drag us down, because it could be that type of overworking experience, and you may never be able to make your product come to fruition, or you may make way too many sacrifices in order to do it, because simply you're taking the wrong approach. You're not looking at it the right way. If it's not fun, you're not doing it right. So ending here, the company that I have is Order of Merchants. It's an LLC. Website I have, there's a lot of free material on there, videos. I've done 3 LIB talks in the past. They're all on YouTube. You can check them out. And you can find them at orderofmerchants.com as well. Please, if you have any other questions, come and say hi to me. Thank you.